And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Starting off with flying weather for Saturday morning. Good VFR here, central interior, all the way up to the north slope there, down to Kodiak Island, even Bristol Bay eastward here. And then marginal VFR, the northern half or so of the southeast coast, with IFR for the southern areas. And up along the Arctic coast, some IFR central and east side, and big area of IFR here pushing in with a weakening system across the northern Bering Sea, Seward Peninsula area down into the Yukon Delta. And then that trails back into some more IFR over the western Aleutians. And for the afternoon, that area pushes eastward here, coming up with marginal VFR advancing toward the western Alaska range, possibly by late in the afternoon, more likely into the evening hours, with that extending down into Shelikof Strait, possibly pushing across Kamishak Bay. Staying VFR though, Cook Inlets, the Sitna-Manuska Valley, Copper River Basin, as you can see, the North Gulf Coast here, all the way up to the north, and mostly VFR for the north slope. Marginal VFR, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, IFR real close to the coastline up there, and then some IFR trailing back into the southeastern Bering Sea, with conditions not too bad over the Aleutians. And for the daytime on Sunday, actually back up here, this area dissipates as it moves eastward, and then this with that next big front coming into the western Bering Sea with the intense low center back up over the Russian Far East. So IFR pushing into St. Lawrence Island, coming down, bearing down on the Pribilof Islands by Sunday morning and into Adak and Atka. Marginal VFR now over the western part of the state here on up to the southern slopes of the Western Brooks Range, and then the North Slope and central and eastern North Slope and Arctic coast, marginal VFR. So marginal VFR here with the rest of that moisture that pushes inland with a weakening system there along and north of the Alaska Range. And VFR, Kodiak Island, southern Alaska, and now VFR for the southeast coast. And for the Sunday afternoon time, VFR, eastern half of the state, lower conditions with good area of IFR here. All that southwest flow pushing a lot of moisture on up, and that'll drive IFR inland here across all of the Yukon and portion of the Kuskokwim Delta. Marginal VFR across the Kuskokwim Valley to the western Alaska Range. And then southwest flow off the Brooks Range there keeps the North Slope and Arctic coast in a VFR condition there. And again, VFR for the Panhandle. And for passes, Anatufik and Adigan, marginal VFR for both passes there in the Brooks Range tomorrow. And Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, you'll see clouds thickening and lowering in the afternoon, hopefully staying VFR at least till the evening hours. And for rainy, same pattern, VFR, but look for the clouds to increase throughout the day and in the latter part of the afternoon, especially on toward evening, possibly becoming marginal. Windy though, VFR, and Isabel and Mentasta, eastern Alaska Range looking really good for Saturday. Both VFR and either approach Tanita VFR, Portage VFR. Chilkoot and White, lower conditions will be earlier on, gradually improving through the daytime into the afternoon toward evening, hopefully becoming VFR. And for the freezing levels here, 2,000 feet tomorrow morning over the southern southeast coast, and at the surface down southeast of Kodiak off the North Gulf Coast, and then back up the coastline here all the way up into the Chukchi Sea, and 2,000 feet up into the northern Bering Sea, 4,000 to 6,000 feet here over the Aleutians. And for icing, system coming into the west here, bringing some possible isolated moderate rime icing along the northwest Arctic coast down across the western Brooks Range, Kobuk-Selawik valleys here, back toward Kotzebue, and again this shifting eastward, and that'll cover the lower Yukon River Valley there down to the Delta. And the next big area icing still way out here to the west, but that'll be advancing eastward tomorrow night and definitely on Sunday. And then we've got some mixed icing or isolated moderate rime or mixed icing for the southern southeast coast. And the jet stream here shows the strongest jets south of the Panhandle there, cutting across the southern Queen Charlotte Islands. North to northwest winds about 65 knots over the eastern interior, all the way down to the North Gulf Coast. And then still northwest out here, another band, a little bit stronger here, out of the north to northwest, 85 knots, diminishing to about 70 knots as they approach the east central Aleutian areas. Then a very strong jet about to enter the Bering Sea farther to the west. And at 9,000 feet, west to north winds here coming in. Not too strong, 25 to maybe 35 knots here, especially along the North Gulf Coast, Kodiak Island. A little stronger here out of the west, up to 40 knots there in toward the northwest coast and the Chukchi Sea, St. Lawrence Island. And the stronger winds here making slowly advancing eastward up to 70 knots coming into the western Bering Sea. Otherwise, 3,000 feet, looking something like this, 75 knots southwesterlies or higher here coming into the far western Bering Sea. Saturday, tomorrow and tomorrow afternoon, 45 knots into the central Bering Sea, ridging right through here, making for a lighter wind condition there, but still west at about 40 knots coming into the Chukchi Sea there. Northwest winds 30 knots, Barren Islands on down along the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island area. Light over the central and northern interior areas, as well as the Gulf of Alaska and the southeast coast. So turbulence-wise, still some considerable moderate turbulence here, gradually improving throughout the day, but bumpiest conditions will be early in the day tomorrow for the southern Kenai Peninsula, Barren Islands into Kamchatka Bay and Kodiak, and then possibly isolated moderate there for the western Arctic coast. Then the heavier turbulence starting to come into the far western Aleutians.